And welcome to this session. I have the great pleasure and honor of being the chair, but quite frankly, I think my job is really easy today. I'm just here to keep time, but to also help introduce some of the fantastic speakers that we have here today. And so we're really looking forward to an interactive discussion with all of you in the audience as well. Let me start by asking a very quick question. How many of you in this room are chief information officers or the equivalent role at a university or organization? Can you raise your hand? 4 of us. Okay. Well, I'll be asking the same question at the end of the session to see how many more people show up or decide to come forth.
Some of us have lost our jobs during the 90 minutes.
That's right. It could be that. So let me introduce the great panel that we have assembled here. You've all met Tracy, so I'll just highlight that I've had the great pleasure of working for Tracy, because at the end, Internet2, as you mentioned, we have the challenge to work for the university, so I believe that I work for Tracy. I am the Vice President of Community Engagement for Internet2 and also a member of the program committee for this conference. So thank you for inviting me to be the token American in that great committee. But I had the great pleasure of working with Tracy, not just because Duke University has been a member of Internet2, but Tracy is also the chair of one of our very important advisories on international strategy. So she's been gracious enough to be chairing that effort for now over a year. And she's helping guide the programs and things that we're doing in the international and in our global programs. Right next to her is Mark Johnston. Mark is Assistant Director of ICT at the University of Southampton. He's also a graduate, as I understand, from the school. And he's now part of the directorate with the specific responsibilities for specialist research support, technology strategy, and their global strategy, all their international strategies as well. We then have Seamus Shaw, who's the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer, responsible for university-wide IT services, including academic and administrative systems, research IT, teaching and learning technologies, and these universities' web services as well. So he's our host too. Thank you. And he's been the CTO of UCD from the 1st of June of 2012. Then last but not least, we have Sean Duffy, who has been the Director of IT Services at the University of Birmingham for just over 5 years. He's responsible for the bulk of IT services across the university, including high-performance computing, student clusters, and core business systems. So with that in mind, I am going to hand this off to Tracy, who actually just gave a very thought-provoking keynote. And our plan is, again, to hopefully, out of her presentation, she had a number of questions and challenges. I invite you to ask anything. And Tracy's going to kick it off with this. I will come back at the end and we'll help with the questions as well. But with that in mind.
Great, thanks. So you don't have to hear another background and context from me. What we're going to do is start out with the 3 panelists who join me here and ask each to give just a couple of minutes on how they think about their global campus and what the perspectives are from their global campus. And then we'll have some questions and dialogue and open up to some. So we hope it will be a really interactive session, a very engaging session. And if it's not, don't blame us, blame yourselves as well, because we want you to chime in and jump in and make sure that you get your questions answered and you're participating in this panel at the appropriate time. So let me first launch it over to Mark to talk to us for a few minutes about Southampton and how you think about global in your context.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Johnston. As Anna said, I'm Assistant Director of IT at the University of Southampton. We were one of the first IT departments in the Russell Group universities. The Russell Group are the research-led universities within the UK to centralise our IT completely. And we've been through a heck of a tumbling journey with that, but there was a benefit specifically for this session that actually because we've centralised our IT, we do now have specialists within the central team that are helping with our globalisation strategy. So every strand of globalisation that the university is involved in, we are very much a part of. They come to us, we work alongside them, and so far that's working well. Globalisation is a key strand in the university strategy. We're relatively new to that game. Probably 3 years ago, we opened our first branch campus. So if you compare that against, other universities like Nottingham or Monash or many other universities that are well known for being global, we feel slightly late to the party, but that's not stopping our inertia. So first one 3 years ago in China. That was a branch campus that was in partnership with another university that was based in China. So that saw them providing us the space, the buildings, and then we would recruit the teaching staff, put the teaching staff there. The host organisation would recruit the students, but ultimately those students would graduate from this Chinese university with a University of Southampton degree. So that was our first foray. 2 years ago, we took an even bolder model and said, actually, we're going to build a purpose-built campus in Malaysia to teach our mechanical engineering students. Now, this all stems back from a major investment from the Malaysian government to say, we really need to invest in our teaching, in our education systems, so that what we've got going forward are well-trained staff that are homegrown. So what they did was approach a number of international universities that said, actually, I want you to come to us teaching your best-of-breed subjects. So Newcastle University in the UK were first there teaching medicine. We followed up to teach mechanical engineering, but it's not just a British thing. There's the Dutch Maritime Institutes of Technology. There's a multimedia university from Malaysia themselves. Singapore are recognising the option to grow into Malaysia. So what we've built at is a dedicated city, basically, called EduCity, that will start to become a big strategic thing for the Malaysian government. And that's not just teaching higher education either. Our future queen, Kate Middleton, she went to Marlborough College. Marlborough College has also grown into EduCity, so they're teaching now further education in Malaysia, again looking to grow their student numbers internationally. And even my local school where I live in Southampton, Mountbatten School, they're also focusing on the globalisation. So don't just think that this panel here is talking about higher education. That's what we're here to talk about today. But actually the globalisation is at every level of learning and teaching. Couldn't come to a presentation like this and not mention MOOCs. So obviously we were one of the first in with FutureLearn, who are the UK MOOC provider. And yeah, so far so good. We're planning to grow our MOOC numbers significantly over the next few years. There's anyone interested in archaeology? There's one launching today, shameless plug. Where else are we going? China, we recognise, was a big opportunity. So having teaching our fashion design in China already, we recognise that pre-sessionals are a huge opportunity. So what we're seeing is people that want to go abroad to study, but don't have the level of English that they need to pass immigration rules. So what we're now looking to do is to actually go into China and raise their English profile before they actually come to any university, not just ours, but any university. So that will start later on this year. The driver for this is, for us, the international student growth year on year was around about 6% per annum. So that was quite healthy. But over the last few years, that number's dropped significantly. So we're seeing around about a 1% growth per annum. So what we've said is, actually, we can't wait for people to come to us. That's just not going to work. So we're moving to them. So predominantly in an easterly direction. We're doing plenty of collaboration with the United States, but a growing focus now in China, Singapore, Malaysia, Korea, India, those kind of countries. But of course, so far I've just spoken about teaching. As a research-led university, teaching is only a part of what we do. The biggest revenue stream for our university is around research. And for all the same reasons that we're going international with teaching, we've got to go international with research, with enterprise. So if I started to talk about those partnerships, I would be here all day talking about the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of partnerships we've got for research and enterprise. So specifically next for me, Singapore Institute of Management is opening this October, teaching law degrees. Xiamen University in China for the pre-sessionals. Hanoi in Vietnam next summer, again for our Faculty of Business and Law. Busan, which is in South Korea, That's where one of our engineering faculties, engineering departments is going, again, to outreach the students there. Talked about our Malaysia campus as well, USMC. At the moment, we're teaching several hundred students, but we recognise the market's there. We want to grow that to several thousand students just in Malaysia. So we lump all that together, and we're looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of people earning University of Southampton degrees, earning intellectual property for the research for the University of Southampton, being all over the world. So our students are global, our staff are going more global, and a global and roaming institution pretty much needs one main thing. That's good networking. So that's the main reason why I'm here today and why we want to kind of raise that profile with you guys today.
Fantastic. Seamus, our host today at the wonderful institution, tell us about how you think at UCD about global and international and what that means here at this campus and how that's changing.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. So I'm Seamus Shaw. My title is Chief Technology Officer, but I'm not technology. I am very much a CIO role, so service is really what I aim to deliver for the university. Welcome again to UCD. Welcome to the Irish weather. It will improve at some stage. It'll probably have sunshine in the afternoon and probably a bit of snow in the evening, because we are a country of 4 seasons and that, you know. So when I was asked this question, what UCD kind of has a tagline of being Irish Global University. What does that actually mean? To us, we have about 5,500 international students who are actually on our campus. So they come to a campus. We have about 4,000 students who are overseas who'd never come here to UCD, and they're in different parts of the world. And really, I suppose the programs that are delivered overseas are delivered through different types of facilities. So for example, we have a medical school in Penang in Malaysia. We would have a business program that's really outsourced to a company called Kaplan. They deliver that in Singapore for us. In Beijing, we're evolving and developing a campus with a university there. Our computer science deliver a joint program in Fudan and Shanghai. So there is different models that are in place, really based around the pedagogy and what suits the actual program. We also have a very active student exchange partnerships with 350 institutions across the world. So we like to get our students to do a year away to become more kind of global citizens. And we have a lot of collaborative partners. And we also have the idea that we have now 2 global offices, one in New York and one in Beijing at the moment. They're very focused on student recruitment, and I'll talk about that. So when I think about that today and how our IT strategy and what we need to do to deliver those services, I mean, the first, I kind of put them into 2 categories. So there's a blended approach, so basically when the student sees an academic at some stage face-to-face, and there's kind of the online approach. The most important thing for me and for us as a CIO is that you must be in the conversation. You have to be in that conversation that's going on, because there's a lot of things going on. Especially in the Irish context, our IT systems and services are very centralised in the university. So basically what you'd see in your kind of faculties, we call them colleges and schools, you see more local niche areas, but everything else is centrally managed through our department. But there still is other conversations going on. I think for me, it's based around service models. What is the appropriate service model on a global context? And that's not one size fits all. So for example, what we deliver and help in the program in Singapore can be very different in China. China is a very difficult place to deliver services into. And it's not just about technology, it's about political, it's about cultural, and so there are challenges there. So it is first and foremost about what service model you deliver into those relevant countries, kind of like a template for each country. Since coming into the job, I'm kind of evolving our service in very much a brokering approach. We were heavily engineered here on campus, 2 data centers, live DR, etc., etc. I'm trying to move away from that. I don't believe that's where the added value is anymore. So I kind of work on the basis that it's cloud and mobile first, kind of like the Microsoft tagline. I believe they got it from us. But so it's very important that we look at that. Now, that doesn't always work in every single country and every single kind of business model, but it is where I start. And then I look then to see if we have a particular issue that we can't do cloud or mobile, we look for partnership. China being a really good example that you would need to partner to deliver services onto campuses in that country. So, you know, when we think about, for example, when I talk about these kind of service models in the brokering, we migrated all our staff and students to Google Apps for Education. So they use the email, calendar, etc. That does not work in China. That's not a technology issue in China, that's just pure political issue with the relationship between the Chinese government and Google. So it just doesn't work for us out there. So we have to think of another way of delivering a similar type service locally. But it doesn't mean that we have to go change everything just because in China that doesn't work for us. So that's why I go back to different service models that work in different kind of cultural areas. When I think of online, we have a UCD online presence, and that's on a global reach, typical of most universities. In the MOOCs, we're part of Universities 21. It's kind of a global group of universities, about 27, 28. My colleague Sean is part of that. So through the University of Edinburgh, they have developed a MOOC that we're actually going to be using. It's in critical thinking and global challenges. It's interesting when I got a presentation from Edinburgh, they clearly put it that this is an experiment for them. It's a pedagogical experiment. They've invested £1 million sterling into it, and they don't know where this is going to go, but they want to be part of it. It's kind of a shop window for them. So it's kind of similar to what we want to do. We're going to experiment with it and see where it leads us. We're not clear, and our academics aren't clear from a pedagogical, where this is going to go from a MOOC's point of view. If I think of the future plans, which is kind of, so all that collaboration is going to continue on. And we have a new president who just arrived. He was previously in Durham University and spent a lot of time in the University of Western Australia, Professor Deeks. And he kind of has an opinion that the college and schools will continue doing their collaboration programs that work across the world. But he has a new concept that he's bringing to UCD. And that is the idea that we've divided the world up into kind of 5 regions, and we're basically going to have a global center in each one of those regions. This global center is going to be initially very focused on student recruitment. And what he wants to do is actually recruit students overseas to come to this campus. So he has a slightly different view on the whole global university. And what he feels is that by bringing the students here to campus, our Irish students will be enriched, become better global citizens, and vice versa. So we're going to have centres in New York, centres in New Delhi, centres in Beijing or Shanghai, and centres in Singapore. They will develop into academic centres eventually. So you'll have things like student recruitment will go on. There may be some teaching, video conferencing coming from alumni events. Academics may stay when they go there, and that's his concept. So when we talk about the flipped classroom, I kind of think about the flipped strategy. A year ago, I was thinking we're going to be building a lot of campuses in China. Now we're thinking, well, we're going to flip that around because he actually wants those students to come here. So that has its own challenges, obviously local, because there's a lot of cultural issues, how we blend the students here on campus, the type of technologies they require when they stay on campus, etc. So really, when I think about the strategy going forward, our new digital strategy that we're going to be putting in place next year, we continue to be the brokering approach. 2 key building blocks for me, and it's really for yourselves, the network is absolutely key. And how we work together, as Tracy said earlier on, delivering services, for example, into the likes of China, and going through the different hops and trying to get that working, that's really tedious and kind of difficult. And then on the same time, I have Vodafone knocking on my door saying, I'll do that for you. And I'm going, well, no, sorry, I have all these connections. No, I'll do that for you. No problem, James. Don't worry about it. I'll do it for you. Just don't worry about that. So that is something we do have to think about. And here in Ireland, we have HANet. And I'm a director on HANet, and I know the Chief Exec, John. We've talked about this kind of. We talk about the new services we want to bring in, but there's a challenge to the core services that we have, which is the networking, because these companies can now deliver these things at a very cost-effective. I know you can talk about the added value and everything, but that's a challenge for me to deliver that message to my chief financial officer when it's kind of price. Two last comments. Beware the shadow clouds. I heard this term recently. It has to be an American term. I think it's a really cool term. So if you think of this building is connected to 10 gigs straight out to the internet, if I have researchers who are on the top 2 floors, Professor Marquis was talking about the insight data analytics, they won't have to come near us. There's a very big danger as an IT department in a couple of years we'll become irrelevant. If we're not in that conversation that's happening on the 2 top floors of here in our data analytics, because they have the power, they have the connectivity, they won't need to talk to us. So it is really important that we get into that conversation. Thank you.
Great. Sean, take us home in terms of where things are at Birmingham.
Okay, just a little bit of background on the University of Birmingham. We're about 28,000 students, of which about 20% are international. We've got distance learning, so there's probably about 2,000 to 3,000 students who rarely come to the university. We don't have remote campuses, other than Stratford, which is tiny. So essentially the model currently is that students come to Birmingham. What I wanted to just outline were the 5 things that I think are relevant for NRENs in terms of what Birmingham needs. The first is for the teaching side, and we've heard a lot about that. We in Birmingham have last September switched to use Canvas as our teaching environment. This is, I think we were the first university in Europe to adopt it, and we've completely swung over. So we were Blackboard before. It runs on Amazon Cloud, and it is loved by academics and students alike. And it's bringing new ways of interacting with the students. So media assignments, video comments, all of those kind of things. Something like 20% of the students access those from mobile devices. And I think rather than just talking glibly about mobile, we need to understand what the impact of that is. Rather scarily, I think students in our residences on average have 6 mobile devices, which is a bit of a challenge for putting in wireless connectivity. But we need to recognise that mobile is going to become the normal way of doing things. We already have education vendors who develop for mobile first before they develop for web. So the first thing that we need low latency, high availability, interactive services for these kind of cloud services. There needs to be very high availability on the connectivity. And we need to recognise that the connection with the mobile networks has to be really, really strong. The impact of MOOCs, I mean, we've got a couple of MOOCs on dental photography and Hamlet. I mean, MOOCs tend to be a little bit odd. But one of the interesting consequences of MOOCs, and people aren't sure about the value, but when learners go through a MOOC and they then choose to go to a university, the current experience in universities that have been doing this for a number of years is they're disappointed, because the MOOC experience is a highly professionalised, tailored experience, and they come to university and they use the VLE and it's cobbled together. So I think one of the challenges that we have inside a university is to offer the same level of experience as the MOOC services offer. So that's the first thing. The second need we've got is for research. Our presence internationally is not undergraduate presences, it's research presences. So we've got a research campus in Guangzhou in China. We've got collaborative relationships with Jinan University, with Sun Yat-sen and a number of other universities. And that's a big drive for us. We've got collaborations in the US, in Chicago, the University of Illinois, and growing in Brazil. And the need for those, clearly we need to be able to interact in the normal way, but the need for sharing big data, huge data sets, whether it's coming from CERN, whether it's coming from the Square Kilometre Array, whether it's omics, genome information, those are huge datas that are flying around. And if they're running on the same network as the interactive, my concern is that it will swamp the interactive while it's happening. So we get the kind of situation where you have a separate link for scientific or engineering disciplines. So the challenge for NRENs is to give us both without penalising either of them. The third need is the hybrid of those two. So we've got academics who now want to do labs without walls. Video conferencing, not in nice studios, but in the lab with interactive, multi-channel conferencing, with the sharing of big data with images, x-rays, all of those kind of things live. So we need the mix of the interactive low latency, but the high bandwidth. The fourth thing we need are the cloud services. We've got probably 10 major services in the university which are now cloud-based. Not because we set out to do that, but because they happen to be the best services around. And we need great connectivity with those providers, whether it's generic ones like Amazon or Google or Microsoft, or education-specific. And every one of the NRENs is probably building connections with the Blackboards and with the Ex Librises and all the rest of them. And we could do with some efficiencies there. It may point to a need for some kind of trading model between the NRENs so that we don't have hundreds of different connections. The last thing that we need is about security. The advent of cyber espionage, and for me cyber isn't what the UK government is calling it now, which is just information security. It's the 20-odd countries around the world who want to sidestep basic research and pinch it from existing research-intensive universities. And that's a real challenge, because we want those students, we invite them on campus, we give them a PC, we connect them. We've got tremendous industrial and research collaborations in those countries, but those same countries are also trying to pinch our IP. And we need the NRENs to work with us. If you get attacked, it's too late. You've already lost whatever you've lost. But at least if we can share that, and other universities can benefit from that so that they don't get attacked. So I'm really, really strong on trying to build a network of collaboration to protect ourselves, hand in hand with the political pressures for open access to research output and all the rest of it. So I mean, I think there's a real contradiction there in terms of open and security and the competitive side of tapping into all of this potential new market for us.
Great, thanks. So with that context setting and opening set of remarks, I'll start and seed with a few questions, and we'll see where they take us and move on. The first thing I'd like to ask is on this question of research and research collaborations and how those change, or the nature of those are changing globally. And on this one, Sean, I might send the first one over your way. What are you seeing as the changing and evolving nature of research internationally? You talked about your collaboration in China. And how is that research collaboration and the ICT needs of that research collaboration, how is that emerging? Is it coming through you? Is it happening independently of researcher to researchers? Talk a little bit about that, and I'll invite the other panelists to chime in as well.
I think the reality, I mean, we've got 29 schools, and that translates into maybe several hundred different disciplines, and anyone that's connected with the research practitioners knows that they don't listen to me, they listen to their colleagues in the same discipline. There's a naivety. I mean, I came from industry and I kind of thought, well, if there's a good central service, they'll all use it. It doesn't work like that. They decide, and they might decide that they're going to use some system in Hanover or whatever university, and I think the challenge for us is that we have to work with that hybrid. And I think if we can offer services that researchers like to use with low obstacles of entry, with lower zero cost as far as they're concerned, I think that's absolutely key. From my perspective in the UK, research income is less and less block money from the government, and it's more competitively won, and in fact it's flat. So the big opportunity for research income for me and for the university is in Europe with Horizon 2020. I mean, there's about 3 billion euros available for ICT research in there, for example, and there's, I don't know what it is, 90 billion euros. And in order to have access to any of that, it's through collaboration. So at least 3 nation states have to be involved in those researchers. I'm sure you guys will all know that. So tapping into what funds are available almost assumes collaboration. And I can remember in my old days in ICI, when the boss of what is now Zeneca, it's been in the press, he said, look, most of the researchers in the planet are alive and working right now, and they don't work for us. So one of the challenges to tap into all of those researchers. There's a lot of evidence that the impact and the citation levels are much greater if they are collaborative and they are multi-institution.
Others? Seamus, you talked about things on the upper floors here and the researchers there being fairly independent or able to go off and get their own deals. Do you find that there's, I think, fairly centralized, but do you find that there's independence when it comes to those international collaborations?
I think for us, what we did a couple of years ago, we made a clear statement. We actually set up a dedicated team that looks after the research community here in UCD, called Research IT. So what was clear was there was a bunch of central services like email, etc., and there was another bunch of services that they required, you know, storage, high performance computing, and just generally being in that conversation with them again, like consultancy services, and being able to run some training on them. And you know, we've done some kind of, I suppose, innovation, you know, testing with them. Can you know, buying compute cycles from Amazon and those type of. So once you have something you can offer them, they'll bring you into the conversation. If what we found initially, well, I would have found initially, if you go in and say, they want to do X, Y, and Z, and somebody says, well, that port isn't open, or that, you know, they'll just go, I don't want to talk to you anymore. So you kind of get these one opportunities to go in. So that's what we did. We went in with a service offering kind of menu, a catalogue of services. It is a challenge for the team to be in that conversation consistently. And of course, there's all these collaborations going on, and that's where the money is. I mean, what I find in research, they will evolve, they'll chase the funding. So their names, so our new data analytics is called Insight. It'll change its name in 2 years' time if there's more funding available for something else. So they're constantly evolving how they work. But at the end of the day, they are collaborative, they are global. And most importantly is that when you go in, that you have something to offer them. And if you don't have something to offer them, I think they'll cut you out of the conversation. That's what I talk about, the 2 top floors there doing big data. If they have the link and we're not providing something for them, bar a link, they'll just cut you out of the conversation. So I think that being the conversation, but you've got to have something to offer them. And it's not just about a bunch of central services, it's about services that they're looking for.
I think this something to offer point's really important, and it's going to key off a question I want to ask Mark. Did you have anything you wanted to chime in on this point first?
I agree with both those points. For us, what we found was our Malaysia campus kick-started some of those conversations. I mean, you're right, you can't just say we're here, we're open for business, and suddenly everyone's knocking your door down to say, right, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. What we found was actually we did a good job over in Malaysia, and that news spread that actually these guys can really help with that. And it was more than just a link. The link was critical, but it was all the value adds over that. I mean, ahead of going out to Malaysia, kind of 6-8 months before the campus opened, all the academics that were going to be teaching there came through a laboratory we'd set up. What we did in that laboratory was to simulate the network link between the UK and Malaysia, so they could walk in, put posters of Malaysia around the walls, all that, turn the air conditioning down. Basically, had people in this room having the experience of Malaysia, and we got the metrics of what the latency was, what the jitter was, what the packet loss was, all those kind of things, and actually they could sit down and actually really do their job. So if they're looking at working on a high-performance compute platform, they typically with high-performance computing, you'll start with a huge amount of data, and you'll come out with a yes or no. You'll start with I wonder what happens if I do blah, 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 and you'll get huge amounts of data out, or you have huge amounts of data in and huge amounts of data out. Upshot is, high-performance computing involves huge amounts of data. When you're the other side of the world and subject to some of the points that Sean talked about earlier with regards to a notable latency which causes impact, the biggest thing for us was to actually manage their expectations, was to get them into that lab ahead of going global, so they could get a feel for actually what this is going to feel like. But actually with regards to helping them with delivering IT services, for us what we found was that most of our research collaborations they work two ways. They're either partners coming to the UK and collaborating with a UK researcher, or they're the UK researchers going off and collaborating with offshore researchers. And what we found, and one of the examples I'll quote, is our Southampton Marine and Maritime Institute. They have partnered with A-Star University in Singapore, Institute of High Performance Computing specifically, and what they're looking at is shared research. And this, exactly as Sean was saying earlier, this works kind of both ways, that it's both organisations get to go on the paper, which carries a lot more weight. It also means that we get to share knowledge from each other. It's not just us going in with our own practice, this is how we do research. We're going in and finding how other people do research, taking some of their best practice back to Southampton and sharing some of our best practice with them as well. But as we go into a host organisation, what we tend to find is actually we can't do much around the IT delivery. It's in the host organization's network, it's using the host organization's high-performance compute, or it's using the host organization's desktop builds, or whatever, the wireless, whatever that happens to be. So actually as a UK IT provider, there's not really much that I can do to deliver on IT. But again, what we're finding, thanks to some of the good work that the teams have done, is that researchers coming to us to say, we are about to kick off something in blah, 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 and we'll start to have a conversation with the teams there about, well, what do things look like if we want to... a lot of our academics, they will be doing marking as well as doing research, and we want them to be able to do their job from wherever they happen to be in the globe. So if we just focus on, this is a research partnership with A-Star University, that's going to be a recipe for disaster, because it's not just the research that's going to happen when that academic is at that location. They're also going to have their homework to do as well, which again links back to a number of the points that we've already talked about with regards to, what we need is good, strong, secure network links that do allow people to do whatever job they need to do from wherever they happen to be, whether they've told us or they haven't.
Perfect segue to the question I wanted to start with you and then pose to the others, Mark. You say whether they've told us or they haven't. I think you've had at least one campus experience or one site experience where you found out at a point that was far too late in the game, perhaps, right? That there was even this activity starting. So IT wasn't brought in from the earliest days, right? As we would hope and stress, but rather fairly late in the game. Can you talk about how you've put yourself more in the center of conversations and what the implications were for that case, where you needed to quickly nail up resources and get things connected?
I'd probably talk about two cases, actually. Is the first one started with our China campus for our School of Art students studying fashion design. We heard about it probably a year or so before it opened, and got in touch and said, let us help you with IT. No, we don't need any IT. Don't need it. It's going to be fine. Don't need you. Don't need to talk to you. So we had plenty more conversations. You sure? No, definitely don't need you. And off they went, and 3 years in, they've survived without any IT, because they're not getting IT from the local host organisation either, so they've kind of bumbled along without it. So that was, we tried, they weren't interested. What then happened was our Malaysia campus, a good maybe 10 months before it opened, we got wind of it. So purpose-built campus, all sorts of that. I mean, they're wanting AV, they're wanting wireless, they're wanting big storage. It's an engineering campus, so they're wanting huge quantities of storage. Very little notice, really. I'm quite envious of places like Reading that had, 2, 3, 4, even 5 years notice of their international campus in EduCity. But all we could do was react. What we had to do was to take that opportunity and show, you come to us, we can help. And I think to say, sorry, you've come to us too late, wasn't going to be an option for us. This was a one-time shot to basically prove that we could help. And as I touched on earlier, that's one of the reasons why the doors have opened for other research projects. SMMI, they came knocking on our door a good year, 18 months, maybe even 2 years before they went to Singapore. And that was a tiny research project with just maybe half a dozen researchers going there, but they were really keen to get our view on how things were going to be for them.
Great. Let's shift and talk a little bit about cloud services. And Seamus, I might start with you. You talked about being a service delivery organization and needing to adjust how you do that based on culture, technology, other things. How do you think about sort of the global service catalog, so to speak, and how do you make decisions about which of those things you would source yourself from UCD, which of them are happening at the local campus, which are through a cloud, and if that's commercial or whether it's through the NREN community, and in that whole process, where do those issues of either technology and latency and all those factors, or the issues of politics, as you mentioned with doing business in China, where do those come into play that let you have some level of consistency, but also the flexibility that those different global sites require?
As you would say, it's a great question. In other words, do I answer it or not? I think that it's a huge challenge. I don't believe there is I would like to see a global catalogue. I don't believe there's a global catalogue today. For us, as I said, we very much look at cloud first. So if I look at our 12 key services, 60% of our services are now delivered off campus. But it's not because it's cloud, it's just because that is the appropriate service model to suit what we're trying to achieve. Some of those services work in a global setting, but for example, when we move into a country like China, it doesn't work in China because some of those services are being delivered through Google, for example. And as I said before, there's not a very nice, good, positive relationship between the Chinese government and Google. So when you go there, it's just very intermittent to service. So I'd like to see a situation where, when I look across Europe and I see some of the NRENs and what SurfNet and Janet are doing, there's really good things going on. Same here in HGANet, but I'd like a more collective view that if we could pull together, and that is a service catalogue that I could just pick off. I don't want to go through the kind of what that needs to do to architect that, to put that together. I just want to pluck it out and say that's a service that's going to suit my service model. And if we could do that on a global, it's really interesting things that the Internet 2 are doing, or Net Plus, what's been done in the US. You talk about a co-location in Singapore. I'd like to see all those, but I don't really want to be in the ins and out of actually architecting them. And I just want to know that they're a service. And if I have a model that I need to deliver in China, and that is the best appropriate way of doing it, I would do that. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that global catalog is just there today. I don't want to oversell the cloud. It's about service models for us and brokering into those service models. That's really what we're key to do here in UCD. And the services that they can deliver are much more flexible, and be honest with you, they're much more agile. We can get them up and running much quicker. Our email system now is in Google. I don't worry about it at the weekends at 4 o'clock in the morning. I just don't worry about that email anymore. It's a commodity product. I want to move on to talking to the researchers about data management plan, curation of data. That's where I want our resources talking about. I want to talk about due diligence. If they are talking about going into a cloud, private cloud, hybrid, whatever, that we have, we look at the security for it. We say, we'll look after the contracts for you. We'll make sure they're all in place. I want to talk to the NRENs and talk about, I want a peering with Amazon. So if you're buying compute cycles from Amazon, they charge you for the data going back and forth. I don't want that. Why do we need to do that? Why can't we just peer and just take that cost out? So they're the conversations I want to basically have. So really, I don't know if that answers the question, but I don't believe there is one global catalogue that I can pick off today that's going to suit all those. I am talking about a template in each one of those global centres.
Thoughts from others of you about cloud services and where this comes into play? Looks like let's go ahead and get Sean first.
There's probably 3 different ways I think of cloud. One is for application type cloud. So whether it's Hobson's for applicants, ServiceNow for the desktop, Canvas I mentioned earlier. And that's relatively straightforward. You just have to be careful about the data protection. Is it hosted in Europe, kind of stuff. There's the infrastructure clouds, and I'm thinking of Dropbox and the like. Again, I mean, I kind of chair the Russell Group of Universities IT directors, and there's a desire there to have, can we have a shared service for a research store that is secure? And there's a real concern about the security of that. But there's a simple answer. You just layer a security layer on top of that so the cloud provider doesn't see what's inside it, and whether it's box crypto or something like that. And I think by doing that, you can get the benefits of the scalability to be able to upscale it instantly if there's a particular need. And I did have a third need, but it's gone from my head. But I think there are very different drivers for cloud. Yes, I think the other one is the ubiquitous ones like the Amazon or the Googles or whatever. But I think the higher education specific ones are a real opportunity, and the shared service model in the UK, we can now avoid that if we club together on a shared service specific to higher education, and that's very attractive.
And in particular, you're saying club together broadly, globally, right, in higher education, not just within the UK, or are you saying within the UK?
Well, the taxation setup is a UK specific thing, and there are 5 criteria you have to meet, and if you can do that, you can save 20% on your costs, and who wouldn't go for that these days?
Great. Go ahead, Mark, you wanted to add
Yeah,
something?
I think the bit I wanted to add to that was, for me, the more complex it is to set up a branch campus or any partnership internationally, the harder that's going to be, or the earlier engagement that needs to be. So, if we can deliver many of our services from off-premise, whether that's cloud, whether that's a remote data center, we could argue about the terms all day, but for me, what we looked at, given the short notice we had for our Malaysia campus, was actually how many of our services could be delivered to Malaysia in the same way that they're delivered in the UK. So our virtual learning environment, our email platform, all of those, do they all just work? Do they all just work internationally? Are there political issues that stand in the way of things, such as governments that are starting to say, I'm not quite sure, I want you to be having that conversation. But for me, that was our default position, and it still largely is. If we can do things at remote campuses the same way we do it everywhere else, well, kind of why wouldn't you do that? But again, that does come back to the connectivity capabilities that you've got. So for us, what we found is that some services could never be delivered remotely. They, interestingly, I bumped into a former colleague who's with one of the cloud providers that we've discussed today, and he's just told me that, and I'm not sure if this is public, so I won't talk too much about the details, but that what they're looking at doing is opening up SMB access to file store from the cloud. And the first question I said was, well, how are you going to deal with the latency? Because that was the number one thing we found with our Malaysia campus. File store is just never going to work over a high latent network. Like, in high latency, I'm talking 80, 90, 100 milliseconds as a round trip time. File store just dead in the water. So some of those services, today with the technologies available to us, had to be delivered locally. So for our strategy for the branch campuses, it's as it is for everybody else by default, unless it doesn't work, unless there's an obstacle such as a technology, whatever that happens to be, in which case we have to spin it up locally. But that really needs to be the exception for us rather than the norm.
I think Seamus's point earlier about the option of the NREN model or the Vodafone model,
Right.
I think that's a very real issue. And you would hope that the NREN model would be more cost effective, but these guys are all trying to get business.
They're trying to buy our business, right? Get us in the door with one thing and then charge us for others, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's going to be interesting and challenging for the NRENs, right? As they stay, just as Seamus, you talked about, if the researchers go do these things on their own, we become irrelevant. And as soon as we become irrelevant, right, the other folks in the room do as well, because they're relying on the engagement with us to feed that information up.
And it even impacts on campus. I mean, I've got people who want their own research network across campus, separate from the normal campus network, to carry the big bandwidth, big data stuff.
Question?
Yes, so far it's interesting, but you've talked about doing stuff we already do, but Doing stuff we already do, but delivering it at a different place, whether it be the kitchen table campus locally or internationally. But given that the students don't necessarily have to turn up, what are the services that will immerse them into academic life and will teach them the things they currently learn by hanging out on campus? And as we, or at least those of us who partnered up with a later husband, at a student society event, know those kind of things impact your life and it impacts the way you think. And those services are probably different from what the IT department is currently delivering. Do you have any thoughts on what they will do and what demands they will put on the infrastructure and the support services behind it?
I can
Go,
yeah.
Seamus,
I mean,
start us out.
I suppose you saw the presentation earlier on. There's a lot of talks about blended learning, flipped classrooms, etc., and that, and it's still difficult when I talk to the academics what they see in kind of 10 or 15 years' time. Certainly what we see today is mobile, and the student wants to be mobile. We've certainly seen an explosion here in UCD. We got about 60,000 individual devices in any day here, so the students are coming with about 3 devices in their hand. I agree with you. I mean, their style of learning is where they are. Where I sit, is it in my apartment, in having a coffee? That's where I want to learn, bring it to me and that, And so mobile is going to be huge. That's what I believe. And everything we go forward now, when we think of our network design, it's all going to be mobile. And it's not on the campus, So and when we talk about the challenge for the NRENs, they're not coming through our campus network. They're coming through the Vodafones and O2 and all that. And how do we work with those providers? For example, we asked the question, can you have EduRoam on all the mobile networks here in Ireland, and can we have it on the buses and trains, and et cetera, and all those type of challenges and that. And they're difficult ones to overcome. I think, first of all, for an MN, you can't do that at local level. We should try and get together. If we can get together and put pressure on these. Vodafone is a big player. Let's put together at a European level, if we can put pressure on them to try and deliver these type of services. I think what we see, and I've heard an academic talk about, is this kind of personal learning. They bring all this together. So in the Irish student, they do want some face-to-face, but they want to be mobile, they want to be able to pluck this, and that's going to be how I'm going to learn, and that, I'll just take this piece from the library and that, So fundamentally from the infrastructure, it is all about this device they have in their hand, and that's where they want to be learning, and we got to deliver that. But that's not campus-based. I can deliver the wireless here on campus, hopefully to satisfactory levels, hopefully it was satisfactory in this conference, but I can't deliver it on the bus, I can't deliver it on the train, I can't deliver it when they're down the country or when they're travelling, and I got to rely on, is the NRENs or is it the that's a big challenge, I think.
Yeah, I think this notion of the peering with commercial providers in each NREN and then peering the NRENs and passing it through, right? We've had a similar experience as we spin up our campus in China, that great connectivity from there, right? We've used the CERNet to make sure we've got connectivity all the way back, but once people are off the campus, then they're subject to the same kind of challenges and local connectivity, and don't benefit from this exchange. And in fact, much of the traffic was routing all the way back to LA, only to go to our data center in Singapore because of the particular nuances and natures of the case. Sean?
I mean, I took a different thing from your question, which is about innovation. And I think particularly the impact of social networks is a big thing. And traditionally, I think IT organizations in university have, certainly speaking for Birmingham, have tended to do whatever the suppliers said was next to have a look at. But things are happening so fast. I mean, if you think what the world was like 3 years ago, we didn't even have the iPad then. We didn't have people taking email onto mobile phones and all the rest of it. The world has changed so much. And I think I've created a separate unit whose job is to have experiments, most of which will fail, to try new things out with academics across the university, with students. I mean, we've got students doing things which are going to become the new student email app for the university. So I think we need to recognize the pace of change. We need to continue to deliver all the robust, predictable services, but we also need to recognize what's going on around us.
let's build on that a little bit and talk about the pace of change as it relates to MOOCs or online courses and the flexibility that brings, and then what that turns around and means for the traditional teaching on our campuses, right? What kind of changes are you seeing in how your faculty are teaching, perhaps informed by the flexibility of MOOCs or otherwise?
I mean, they try all kinds. I mean, I'm trying things, and just one thing. It was the first one I found. It's not the best, but we were trying a thing called Stormboard, which is Post-its electronically. But a key thing of these social networks is it doesn't have to happen at the same time. And whether it's a flipped classroom or whatever, there's still this concept of the education will happen at an agreed point in time. But the social networks, the idea to be able to post things up, to share them from any device anywhere on the planet at any time, and take that forward, I think can dramatically change the way education happens. So,
Other thoughts about changes in the classroom that you're seeing on your campus, perhaps informed? You've had some experience with
Well, we're too
MOOCs.
new to MOOCs,
Too new to
really.
MOOCs, okay. So for us, I would note yes, you have a question or a comment on this?
A question on the previous discussion about the mobile network. My name is Frans Pank and I work for SurfNet. And I hear you when you say mobility is very important and learning doesn't only take place on the campus and it takes place anywhere, anytime. But at the same time, if this is so important, then why are the CIOs of these universities, why are they not banging on the doors of the NRENs saying mobility is very important and don't only stick to EduRoam, but look at the global situation, look at the global mobile infrastructure towards learning and education. At SurfNet we already started a mobile activity 3 years ago, and the message that we hear from CIOs and CTOs is, well, more or less saying, well, we don't need that. We have Vodafone, we have O2, we have Verizon, so stick to a terabyte network. Look at the conference, how many sessions are on mobility? This isn't going to change if you, as a CIO, start banging on our door saying, we need a mobile infrastructure, we need a mobile architecture, we need a mobile strategy. Why are you not doing that?
Well, it's a great point. It may be a be careful what you wish for point, because maybe it is just becoming clearer to us how much that will affect us. Mark, you wanted to add something to this point?
Yeah, I think it's one of the points that you touched on earlier, that what we've got right now in the UK is fantastic connectivity. You know, wherever their students happen to be in the UK, they can learn, they can interact, they feel part of a big community, because this kind of conversation around bandwidth in the UK is kind of largely gone. You know, people are so well connected wherever they happen to be, on the bus, trains, whatever. For me, though, the challenge is around when they leave the UK or when they're partnering with people elsewhere in the UK, that yes, we might have China for me is the best example. When we were in China, when we were looking at delivering services the same way we deliver them in the UK, whether that be mobile, kind of just looking generally across the whole service catalogue, what we saw was straight out of the box, most of those services did not work. What we found, though, was when we routed it through the Chinese Education Research Network, then things worked a lot better. But of course, that is just when you're at that campus. As soon as you leave the campus, you're no longer connected to the network, and you're connected to the networks that either didn't work at all, didn't perform at all well. So actually the mobility is less for me around the device that you're using, but actually where it is and how well connected that location is to the service that's being delivered to that device. Yeah. So yes, we do want to bang on the doors. We do want to bang on the doors for appropriate latency everywhere in the globe back to the common distribution points for services, whether that be the Azure Cloud, Microsoft Cloud, the Amazon Cloud, data centers in America, data centers in Singapore, data centers in the UK. For me, it doesn't matter. The biggest message I want to get across is wherever the user is coming from, they need to have a good quality of service.
And the user tends to be coming from some commercial network somewhere,
At some point.
maybe in our country, maybe in another country. Sean?
And I think identity authentication is probably a key underpinning there, particularly when you put students into Microsoft or Google Cloud. When you do things overseas where maybe you don't want them to be part of your European-based AD for security reasons. So I think the whole identity challenge is really important. One thing we haven't talked about is students taking programs from multiple universities, and we're seeing that more in the UK, where they will sign up in one university, but that causes them to take modules from 5, even more universities, and they don't want multiple identities, they want common services, and I think that's also a growing challenge.
So just to add a point, which is not really about technology, there is a big issue for the academics, and that's the content. Developing the content, you know, so you saw the videos earlier on with the child with the iPad versus the magazine. These are, you know, new ways that that kind of children are interacting with technology or non-technology. But our academics will need to embrace that. They'll have to work through how they structure their programs, how they're going to use the technology, how the content's going to be delivered, what way will be delivered. What should a student look at on the bus? Shouldn't look at the bus? Is it just going to be? I mean, you have form factor. There's a load of issues in there which really aren't technology issues. They're going to be for the academics to kind of, you know, what way do they want to teach? And content to me is a huge issue. How they design their content. Do they have the ability? Is it education technology to design it, or is the academics themselves? So I think that's a very big part, especially in the mobile. Because some academics are just putting it up on Blackboard and expecting the mobile app and just pick it up, but it's not designed for that in any shape or form. They'll have to rethink their assessment. There's a lot of things that the technology won't be able to answer those questions in that, you know.
We hit a great one with that no one saw coming. That when you're teaching the same module in 2 different locations, in 2 different time zones, how do you do examinations without conflicting the quality of the exam? Because one person will sit it perhaps before another one, so there could be the potential to share the questions through other mediums with someone sitting in a time zone later on in the world. So all sorts of issues we hit like that again, not technology issues. These are just the fundamental challenges of delivering globally.
So I'll invite folks in the audience to please chime in with your questions. I would maybe relate an experience at Duke in terms of MOOCs and the way that has changed what's happening on our campus. As I mentioned earlier today, we've done 25 MOOCs so far, and those have been fantastically informative in terms of how we teach on our campus. Every single faculty member who's done a MOOC has come back from that experience invigorated about how he or she teaches, and viewing the experience as having informed and improved what they do in the classroom. When you have 20,000 students who all send a note and an email and, you know, notify the instructor that they didn't understand a concept in the video, boy, does that get your attention. And if that's the way that person has been introducing that concept year on year on year, and 20 students in the room just couldn't quite tell, their eyes were glazed over and didn't want to raise their hands, it really has informed what faculty learn about what students are learning, what faculty learn about how they have to better introduce information, and then it has created a hunger for flexibility and the flexibility that the MOOCs have. A MOOC is however long you want it to be. All right, the courses on our campus, as I mentioned this morning, have to fit into this particular organizing paradigm we have. And if your course is only 10 weeks long, all right, 30 classes, you've got to find a way to extend it and fill the time. What am I going to put in here that isn't quite that concept? How do I extend that concept to fill that time? So our faculty who, I'd say probably 3/4 is my estimate of those who have taught a MOOC, come back and then teach their course on campus in a flipped style, using the MOOC information, but also breaking it up in ways. And so now we're starting to look at the question of, do we need to have, you know, sort of mini semesters, half semesters options, and what will that do to our scheduling of our lecture halls and classrooms, and how can we do that in a way that, again, constrained by the physical environment and the organizing environment, we wouldn't have had pressure to do that if it weren't for the online courses. Let me ask a question about distance education in other ways. I know several of you have the sort of flying faculty programs. Talk to us about when the faculty go to these international sites, what are they expecting as services, right? Are they okay with the fact that it might be the services from some local partner, or do they expect them to be just like they were back at the campuses? Throwing it out to any of you.
We've got a flying faculty arrangement for Singapore with the Singapore Institute of Management. They use the local services. I think the challenge is more organisational, where it's difficult to fly someone out for 4 or 6 weeks to another country. What happens with their week-by-week program that was back at base. So I think that's a particular challenge. But in terms of the IT, they use the local systems.
Local systems different from what you use at home and doesn't bother them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go so far as it doesn't bother them for us. There's short startup as they get familiar with an alternate system, but they get used to it. They're smart people, right?
I had one question. Do you find that looking at multinational corporations and the way they do business and deal with IT internationally is helpful, or do they have a totally different set of issues that they have to deal with?
Sean,
Oh,
you have a background,
I mean,
right?
I worked for a multinational for 25 years. When I came to Birmingham, I was horrified at some of the stuff that wasn't there, that I just expected universities would have. Basic stuff in terms of conferencing, PC conferencing and things like that. So I think the university sector is really missing an opportunity there, and I've been working to try and improve that. I think there are a lot of similarities between the industrial sector. I mean, I was in manufacturing sector. There's a lot of things we can learn. There's a lot of things that, I mean, IT is IT. Suppliers work the same way. You know, the behaviours of Oracle and other suppliers. It was like deja vu when I came to university. Interestingly, if you looked at the profile of CIOs or heads of IT at UK universities, 60% of them over the last 4 years are not from higher education. So the university sector has very consciously been trying to tap into the experience from other sectors. And I think that's quite a staggering statistic.
Yeah, I'll take a slight angle on that question. I suppose you can't go back to China. China seems to be on the agenda today. Developing a campus in China, we would have went to, obviously Intel have a huge presence here in Ireland. So they built a huge plant in a place called Dalian. It's kind of north of Beijing. So we would have worked with them, listened to them. How do they develop their plant? What we leverage from them? What partners do they use? Could we leverage their data centers? All those type of conversations. And I think we shouldn't go out and try and reinvent the wheel in higher education. And I agree with you with the industry partners. Now, different relationships they may, but even just the knowledge that these industries have in working in these countries. They've been there a long, long time, and a lot of pitfalls. So I think from that, it's been a huge learning experience for us working with Intel and what they. So hopefully in the learning curve, we're quicker up the curve. We won't make as many mistakes, and also just leverage some of the partnerships that they have in place.
Yeah, same thing from here. You know, one of the first calls I made when I heard about some of our campus international programs that we're getting ready to launch was to Cisco, and really working very, very closely with them in partnership, not only as a company that was relevant to the networking internationally, but as a company that is multinational and had been through that space a lot. So learning from each other is certainly essential here, but extending that to the companies who have come before us and done it for a really, really long time. Question?
Yes, I have a question. Because we're mostly talking about what we would like to do and how we can collaborate. And Frans was just asking you to bang on our doors. But I was wondering, are the users banging on your doors? So how do you involve users? How do you know what they want? And how can we, because we are here at the NRENs, here are you and here are the users, how can we collaborate more with the whole chain so that we know that's what users want and that we know what we have to do?
Great point, great question. I think all of us probably have a challenge hearing from, at least in my case, I would say we have a challenge having our faculty reach out to us. What we've tried to do is this idea of having something to offer them. We've, within our campus, we've just started inside the campus having what we call a protected data network that the researchers can put their sensitive data in and know that it has the full set of protections that we would give it a check, right? Even if it is using data that relates to patient care. So some of the most sensitive. This now causes our faculty to then seek us out, those same faculty, and ask for help in other areas. And this idea, same thing as this morning, is collaboration is, we don't do nearly enough of it, even I would say within our own campuses and with our own faculty, let alone then with the national networks and among those national networks. Other observations or options as I go get a sip of water?
I think there's two sides. There's one where we need to connect with our academic partners, and we need to get involved in things early. The HPC that we have in Birmingham, 15% of it is funded by the academics, and they've decided that it's better for them to give the resources so the hardware money, but also the people, and to run it as part of the centre. So being involved early in the bids for research grants is really key. I think the second thing is an active engagement with the NREN in each country. I mean, we've been having very active debates with Janet and Janet's holding group over what it does, what its direction is, where it spends its money. And that can be a bit of a sensitive matter, particularly because there can quite often be a government angle on it as well. But we need to work through that rather than simply ignore it or say it's too difficult.
I agree with all those points. I mean, suggestion for me is conferences like this. Why don't we have split a session in half? Why don't we talk about what it looks like from a business and that, and then the second part of the session will be what that looks like underneath. How it's been architected, what the structure is and that, So to join them two together, so I find sometimes that we have quite service conferences, IT service conferences, and we have quite technical conferences, which is important in their own right, but where are those two conferences coming together? Where is the networking of the service side of the house and the technical side of the house, for want of very loose categories? Where is that happening? So, I mean, we're all networking here today about technologies and all that, but wouldn't it be good to network with some conversations about services and how that's happening and that, So I kind of challenge that to a lot of conferences going on. There should be more joined up and more opportunities to talk to each other on the different sizes. And
let's have some academics here, Let's have people from CERN or from EBI or wherever, because they've got great insights and they've got the view for where they want to take their particular organisations and what they think it will mean for common infrastructure.
It looks like a follow-up comment, and then down here. Did you have a...
Yeah,
sorry.
well, I was just wondering, would you mind if the users come directly to the NRENs? Do you see yourself in the middle, or do you see yourself involved, or do you mind, or do you see users coming directly to the NRENs to collaborate?
I mean, right now there's very little contact between the universities and the NRENs. I mean, I think that needs to be stronger. I think there's a real danger about 100 different messages and having no clarity on direction. I mean, we don't want a one-size-fits-all either. But let's have some leading academics, leading teaching practitioners come and give their perspective.
Yeah, I would add to that in terms of the risk around the researchers coming directly to the NREN is then the CIOs don't know about those uses and needs, and we don't have any way to predict what we need to be doing in our regional networks and on our campuses to support those same faculty who might have the perfect bandwidth that they need once they get onto the NREN, but if they've got bottlenecks between here and there, it's what I mentioned this morning. How do we troubleshoot that? How do we figure out exactly where the problem exists when it transits 4 or 5 or 6 different networks, so to speak? Yes?
Yeah, but isn't there a risk that both you and ourselves get in a way irrelevant because, you talked about the researchers 2 floors up and they prefer to talk to their peers. Mm-hmm. And if they set up the infrastructure together, then you've got the research infrastructure which is sort of linked to the community, and then you're out of the picture, and ourselves.
Absolutely. We all may have the risk of becoming irrelevant, especially as those research collaborations get stronger and as the commodity networks, right, continue to march along and get better and more able.
Yeah, but then if the NRENs are pretty good at collaborating and bring that up, then we probably are a good partner to those research communities out there. And then we may stay in the picture, but not you.
Well, so to the earlier question, what if the researchers do come directly to you? Maybe speaking on behalf of our group, we would very much appreciate it if you would come back and let us know, right? Close the loop on that. Because I will tell you, at least for our researchers, they don't pay any of the bills, right? They bring in lots of the research money, but they don't pay any of the bills. So at the very least, we can't become irrelevant to you to the extent that you are looking for funds from the research institutions.
I think there's a danger that academics think that the NREN service is just a bandwidth service, because there's a lot of added value in there that is quite often hidden and isn't advertised. And I think it's really important that academics understand what they get from the Janet network or the GIANT or whatever. because a lot of things happen behind the scenes in terms of keeping it healthy, next generation, security, all the rest of it. So you really have to sell yourselves and the full complement of what the service is compared to a pure bandwidth from a telco.
Mark, you want to chime in?
Yeah, interesting. At our Malaysia campus, our chief exec got in touch with me and said, "These bills, these network bills, they're just too expensive. Just go sort it out." So I was thinking, well, that's kind of what it costs. For those that don't know, internet transit in Malaysia is astronomically expensive from what I've seen so far. So we pay the region of $9,000 to $10,000 a month, and that gets us 50 megabits of internet transit. It's really expensive. So we went, well, thinking, how can I do this cheaper? I'm just little old me, a little old university in a little old corner of an EduCity campus in Malaysia. Where can I go with this? But I got in touch with NREN. I got in touch with Janet and said, guys, we got a bit of a problem here, because not only are we paying over the odds, so are Newcastle, so are Reading, so are Marlborough, so are all these other UK institutions that are hemorrhaging cash out for things that actually, if we all joined up and worked collaboratively together, we could do something a whole lot better. So, we, through our chief exec, through me to the NREN, we kind of turned this around, and actually now what we've got is a deal that Janet signed with a local internet service provider, and Newcastle University have set up a metropolitan area network in EduCity that's now available not just for the UK universities, but actually anyone that wants to go and join that. And that could only have happened from the end user saying, this needs to be sorted, and me being able to go in partnership to our NREN to say, we've got a common problem here that needs sorting. And I think it was because there were a number of us came to our common NREN and said, this really is a problem for not just me, but for all of us, that was taken seriously, and the NREN did a cracking job for us. So thank you to Janet for that. And I see a lot more of that kind of work happening into the future.
Well, it echoes, I mentioned this morning, the co-location facility we have in Singapore. We have that through internet too. And they work through a co-location agreement with Tata to get us, 10 racks, us being the universities in the US who wanted to have a regional co-location facility to address the issues of latency and otherwise for our campuses in Singapore and China, all around that region. And so through that process, we use the NREN as that level of leverage, right? That level of combining need and driving a better deal than any of us could ever get, even if we knew who to talk to over there, right? We're not being treated as individual customers.
So I just had a comment to that. I mean, I fully agree. But I do think it's a challenge for both of us, is to envision the future together. I think there's a danger that the CIOs envision a future, the NRENs envision a future, and it all, and the academics, we somewhere along the way, we need to bring that thinking together and envision it. What does it look like in 5 or 10 years' time? And sell that back. And say, the alternative in Vodafone's is not what the future looks like. But we got to do that together. We got to find a way of doing that together. And maybe through the NRENs, maybe things, what we try and do here is, when you talk about the conversations, we want the NREN, us, and the academic researcher in that conversation. They may be in the same meeting or just in the conversation. And one of my colleagues here in Ireland had made a suggestion that, it's a very good suggestion, that some of the NREN people should come to campus, should maybe work here for 6 months. Actually see exactly what it's like day to day. Then maybe that takes place in other parts of Europe. But when we're meeting the researchers on the 2 top floors up here, the NREN's sitting in the same. So getting it first hand what the conversation is, and also we're sitting there as well. So it is a 3-way conversation that needs to take place.
Great point.
Yeah, hi. My name is Johan Bergström, and I'm affiliated with an organization called UNIS, European organization. And I would like to touch on that topic specifically, because one of the reasons for me being here is actually to see in what way we can join these two discussions together with an organization like UNIS focused on the ISIT services and the architecture and the infrastructure discussions going on here. Do you see a movement to have those kind of discussions at a joint event or such a place?
I can make a comment. I don't, but I could be wrong. I don't see that movement at the moment. I think it's something we should do. We need to work through how it's going to work. From my point of view, I'd like to see. I mean, for me, a simple example would be we have these breakfast sessions in my department, which are literally just we bring a speaker in to talk about the soft skills, but it's literally having a coffee and a croissant of my service side, my technical side, talking to each other. Coming out of the rooms, we don't have open plan, coming out of the rooms, and that's at a very kind of micro level. But we do that on an ongoing basis where people just come and talk to each other. So we need to figure out on the macro level, how do we do that? Because you have training units, you have other conferences that are on. And I think there's separate conversations. There is some joined up thinking, all right, but I agree with you. I'm not aware, maybe there is a movement, somebody else might know it. I'm not aware of that movement at the moment. And I think the danger is, when we talk about being irrelevant, collectively, there's a danger. And I'm not saying NRENs, you know, you might become irrelevant. Collectively, we're in this together and we do work well, but I think the envisioning of what it looks like in 5 years' time, where is that going to take place? We need to find a form for that to take place. And I don't see it at the moment, but I could be wrong on that.
No, I agree. But I don't see that movement either right now, but that's one thing that I would like to change as well. So I welcome that. It's interesting to hear, and I'll do what I can for my part.
Okay, that's a job for you now. Record that. That's recorded on the website.
Great. I'm not seeing a lot of questions, but let me ask, actually, go ahead. Did you have a question? And then just to give a warning, those people who raise their hands that they have jobs that are similar, I may actually see if any of you want to give a shout out to whether you see different issues or other comments. Go ahead.
One of the things we see happening now with the advent of cloud services is increased self-service for anything that's online. And that sort of comes at the same time as we get more flexible education locally and we get more globalization and learners from abroad, and faculty are traveling just about everywhere. And that leads to a revamping of the support services locally. And in our case in Norway, it's also led us to revamp, or in the process of redoing the way we do support to the IT departments at each university. How do you see the same process happening at your place, and what would be the good things to do in that direction? Because it's a complete reorganization of the way of thinking, of providing information, of sharing information between multiple institutions, being able to track things across organizational borders.
I think you're absolutely right in terms of the consumer's expectation of self-service. My experience of academics is they don't want that. They want a very personal service that's tuned for them and no one else. And the challenge for running an IT operation is getting that balance right. We use a cloud service for the help desk, so we encourage people to put their inquiries online. They get a better service if they do that. But we still have the academics who know where the individuals are and they want to knock on the door and say, can you please do that? So it's a cultural journey. But I think the better the services that we can offer, so that they're not clunky, that they are tuned to what we think end users will need, that we have focus groups that can really understand those, then we can do that. I think we also need to recognize that not everyone wants to be spoon-fed things. If you think of the Apple community as a pretty self-help community, and 5 years ago Birmingham didn't support the Apple, and I thought that was head in the sand. So we created an environment that allowed that to happen through the service desk. But the answer is they help themselves. So it's about creating knowledge bases and facilitating the self-help thing. And we need the IT people to recognize that, but we also need to carry people with us.
Yeah, I'll mention one of the things we've done recently is a big focus internally within our organization on automation in order to make it easier for people to get self-serve kinds of capabilities. So we now have virtual machine infrastructure that any faculty member can just fill out the form, and within about 5 minutes, right, the virtual machine is there. So the equivalent of as easy to get, so to speak, as Amazon. And actually, the best experience I had in the last 6 months from a faculty member, we were on a committee together, and he said, I have to tell you, when we started using your virtual machines, it was much easier than Amazon. And I thought, when was the last time anybody told anybody at a university that one of their services was better than a commercial one? So that went down as another one of those red letter days. Anybody else have anything to add?
I suppose for us, in relation to support the challenge, the first thing that we've done to create kind of more agility and flexibility, our help desk is outsourced off campus, so it's not here on the youth service now. So that gives us the agility to open it at 6 in the morning, 12 at night, whatever, and then you're basically just paying for it. So all calls are routed through there. But we also then operate a distributed support on campus, which is basically we have drop-in centres and we call out. So in a recent survey, it's clear to us that yes, they're very happy to help us very much, but they want face-to-face. They still continue to want face-to-face, even with all the self-service. And I mean, I've got a big belief in trying to simplify IT as much as we possibly can. But I think it's very difficult to move away from face-to-face, so we're still giving some face-to-face to the academics.
We took a slightly different view of if people needed something, they could put a request in and that would get done. And then what we'd start to do is to say, well, actually, we're creating 100 VMs a week, or we're creating, project websites, every hour. So what we started to do was look at actually where delays were coming from and where overheads in IT were coming from, and say, actually, can we start to automate those? That's perhaps where your virtual machines creation came from. But that later came back to bite us, because we things like our collaboration platform, we allow self-service, so people can create any of their sites anywhere in the world. And now if I want to do anything around our Malaysia campus, I've got to think, right, which one of those 12 self-service sites do I need to go and put that information into? Because one was created from one strand of IT, one was created from one strand of finance, one strand of the business, one strand of teaching. So the self-service achieved its goal, that everyone got their own bit, but then what we ended up with was kind of a hodgepodge of things that then need to be glued together by the grey matter here, and then we started to find that the wrong data was in the wrong place. So, but that was our approach to automation, and we've got a long way to go with that. We're just changing our IT service management tool to one that hopefully will bring us a lot more automation at that level. But again, that came from the pain that we were feeling as IT delivery, that was essentially clogging us down with work that actually was wasting our IT staff time. So if we can start to free up more of the IT staff, then we can start to do a lot more of the engagement with the research, with the academic community, to actually deliver a lot more value back, rather than what we might have seen in corporates of fabulous, I can cut, £100,000, £1 million, £10 million off our bottom line because I've automated that. I can look to redundancies. We're kind of the other way around, that we're looking at reinvesting the staff in other aspects of the work that they can do, because the work isn't going away for us, that's for sure.
Yeah, our biggest use of the virtual machine services is not necessarily the faculty or the students who it's available to, but our own IT staff. And so, it used to take a week or so to build a web server that had the authentication infrastructure, that had all those components. Now it takes just a few minutes, right? And so that automation that saves our own staff time and lets us redirect it to other activities is crucial. So before I hand it to Anna for the housekeeping pieces, let me ask those of you who are in the audience and who are related to IT at universities in similar kinds of positions, what did we miss? And we don't have a lot of time, so view it as a lightning round, right? What's the shout out you want to make sure the people in the room hear, if there is one? Yes?
Well, you mentioned it briefly. It's identities.
Identity. Okay.
Good point.
Any other shout outs? Yeah.
It seems to me that we're all exposed to the same macro drivers, so to speak. Technology has enabled users to serve themselves and to do things in an easier way than before. And to prevail, we both as NRENs and as IT organizations within the universities need to climb up the food chain, so to speak, and get closer to the core business of the universities. That means that in some areas we might be competing for the same meat, so to speak. Where do you see your role, and where do you see the NRENs going forward?
Well, I'm not sure how much time we have to fully deliver that answer. Maybe I would go back to the earlier point by Seamus and the need for us to get together to have those conversations, to figure it out together, rather than us deciding what that role is and you deciding, right, what that role is, or others deciding what that role is, and then finding they don't quite line up.
I think for a CIO role, my role is about 80% communication. I spend 80% in the business, understanding it, where the value is in technology, and then bringing that conversation back to my team and to the NRENs. But really my role is being with the senior management team in the conversation and translating that into what we need to do, and also bringing to them new ideas and say, well, there's a big move to kind of link research to education. Technology can do that for you, and this is how we can do it. But being in that business conversation is really, I see as my key role.
I mean, from my perspective, IT is simply one of many areas the university can invest in. It can get better academics, it can buy facilities, it can have partnerships. So for me, it's about making sure that the business cases are strong and that from a university level, it is the right thing to do.
Great closing point. Anna, take it away.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank all of you, and I ask all of you to give these guys a round of applause. So just some reminders. Please make sure you fill out the evaluation form for this session. I think in particular, given on the note that we close, would you want to see more sessions like this at the next lineup of conferences? Should we, let me invite your ideas on how we could get more CIOs and university representatives here. I think from what I heard, there's a lot of interest in making sure that we're talking to one another. We have clearly NRENs represented here. So how do we get more of these guys into the room? So we'll welcome your ideas. Please reach out to me or anybody from Terena as well, and fill out your evaluation, please. Don't forget about that. Please enjoy the rest of the program. As it was mentioned before, there's lots of things still happening, and don't forget to vote for the student posters, please. If you haven't put your, I guess it's not a dot, your square, make sure you do that as soon as you can, and enjoy your lunch, and thank you again.